The Banshees are calling as we dive into the various origin stories of Mad Sweeney. It's American Gods, Season 2, Episode 7, Treasure of the Sun. Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to this week's review of American Gods. So yes, as usual, spoilers are ahead. And of course, do want to remind you of our quick jump index system. Take a look down in the description below. We have this whole review listed out by time code. Want to jump back later to something you missed? Want to watch this in reverse order? You can. Just take a look down in the description. Jump around. It's, for your convenience. Anyway, let's kick things off. Oh, first off, let me wish you all a nice happy Easter. I guess technically when you're watching this, it will be after Easter. But as the show came on, it did. And maybe, I don't know, at the end we might get some hopes of a rebirth, a promise. Maybe a little one because we lost Sweeney today. Or, I don't know, it's gods, which may or may not always be permanently dead. Gungnir seems to be the staff to do that, or the spear to do that, rather, if it were. But yeah, so the Banshees were a calling for Sweeney, and that seemed to be the consistent theme. We were looking at the end of Mad Sweeney this episode, and again, like I said, very sad. Sweeney is like my favorite character in the whole show. So watching him gone, it's gonna create a little hole for me. But as are many things possible in this show, how constant is death? Is rebirth possible, especially when you are a god king like Sweeney? Maybe this isn't the very end of him that we'll see, but we'll touch on that in a little bit. So yeah, like I said, a good episode. I think overall was solid, good, decent storytelling. We got to do some get to hear some interesting takes on Sweeney's background, a little insight into his character, and some great little battle sequences too. The flashback bit I thought were done really well in this episode. So like I said, good solid bit, just a little sad with how things ended up. But let's get things kicked off with basically the crux of the episode, which is these backstories of Mad Sweeney's, these multiple remembrances of the past. And it's funny because it does remind me a bit of the Joker, for all of you DC fans out there, who seems to have various origin stories himself. None of them all completely true. Why have a single origin when you can have multiple choice? And that seems to be the case that we have with Sweeney, though it's sort of overlaid with reasonings of madness. That the madness of him has caused him to forget his stories. What has he heard? Sort of reinterpret things. And it's interesting because Ibis sort of tells Sweeney later on about stories, that stories are truer than the truth. And I think in our world of American gods, of this manifesting belief system, this is actually really true, and this might kind of play into a lot of that belief on Sweeney's part, not just from a madness standpoint of not being sure to remember the truth, but the fact that as these stories are told as an old Irish entity, as a god king himself being around for so long, these stories and tales are reinterpreted and added onto and subtracted from and twisted around so much that for a being that exists upon belief, what people believe may actually change a lot of his origin stories. So I mean, just sort of an interesting idea right there, that the factual, elements of the story may not necessarily be the most important parts, but how we interpret a lot of these stories and how much belief we put into them. But yeah, so Sweeney's tale and his fight against Balor. Historically, we're looking at Lugh. I think that's pronunciation. It's L-U-G-H. It's Irish. I don't know if it's Lugh or Lugh. I've looked at a few different interpretations of it, so forgive me if I'm messing this up. But yeah, an Irish god fought his grandfather Balor with spear. Balor had a prophecy that one of his grandchildren was going to kill him, so this is what these stories do come back around. And of course, ends up killing Balor, defeating the Fomorians there, and sort of ruling forward. So the basics of this story are historically true. Yeah, see, again, these are kind of the interesting part about stories being truer than the truth. We're saying that this is true, even though, from our standpoint, these are just stories, myths, and legends. So, okay, that sort of continues to play on the whole idea. But yes, and then the idea is that the madness, that Sweeney's madness was inherited from his grandfather, from these Fomorians, these sort of magical but bent and twisted and living in the seas and underground, and the decay is very different from the toothed in, it's leaving me right now, the more noble, crafty, higher evolved kind of like spiritual beings. These were the sort of the wars that we had going on. Sweeney Luke being the king of that. And so, yeah, this is a very important entity in Irish idealism. And the idea of betraying, was it the Grey Monks, as the church came in. And I love that sort of bit of the story as we're talking about Sweeney fighting off the invading gods as they come upon the Irish lands. And then the church came in and they sort of swept the rug out from underneath, because they basically turned all of the gods, instead of battling them directly, they just sort of relabeled them, calling them fairies and such, and little folk, and just sort of undermined their power just like that. And then so basically later on, the stories that we get when we see Sweeney as the king, the god king, with his wife striking out against the church, it's sort of another interpretation. Did he get his madness from his grandfather, or was it from this encounter with the church? The betrayals, well, again, not really a betrayal. The church is sort of invading Ireland, so I'm not sure if they came in quietly and sort of, hey, we're not that bad, and just sort of started subverting the belief system by renaming the Irish gods as, again, fairy folk, little people, and the like. Because, again, as Sweeney is sort of protectorate, hearing the church bells on his land, knowing that that is subverting the very belief system that he requires to live, that he would strike back against the church. And I guess that's when he goes up to the bishop, tells him to get out, grabs a spear, stabs one of the Grey Monks, and then the bishop curses him for death in battle, that he too would die by the spear. So as he goes up into the big battle, he can hear the Banshees wailing, foretelling death, knowing that he would die by spear, and thus he runs away. And by that running away, abandoning everybody on the battlefield, he is cursed with his madness. So we're getting several different stories of where this madness sort of manifested from. And I liked how a lot of the episodes is sort of him exploring, remembering these different stories until he finally, eventually down the road, gets to the end, gets to the truth of who he was, and maybe kind of regaining strength upon that. Because as the leprechaun, he's been sort of Wednesday's bitch. He's the errand boy. He's doing what he's told. And without remembering where he's coming from, the truth of his own existence, maybe he needed that in order to gain up the strength to stand up against Wednesday, or really just sort of extricate himself from his own obligations. Now, we did get that one shot from the battle with Balor, because he stabs Balor through the eye with a spear, which is very reminiscent of Odin with the one eye. And then as he's speaking with Ibis, he's remembering, was it in fact Odin that he did stab and behead? And I'm not sure if that's actually the case. I think in some ways that might be projection right there. Because saying that Odin was Balor, that really changes a lot of the storytelling. I think they firmly established that Odin is Odin. That Wednesday is Odin, and that's sort of a different god. But I think the anger, the frustration, maybe even the trust that he has put into Wednesday's hands is sort of giving us that similar overlay in story, that there's a reason why he's sort of cross-connecting it. And that might also have been one of the reasons of why Ibis was reminding him that stories are truer than the truth. that belief system, you may be overlaying what actually happened because of your projections and how you want to see things. So, again, they don't hit on that much. I mean, there are sort of the eyes, and obviously he's really fighting against his obligations to Wednesday. And what were those? They sort of imply that it's a promise of war that he would do Wednesday's bidding, he would do to us in order for this large battle. And I'm wondering if that's sort of an idea of redemption for him. Because that is another sort of feeling that's going on with a lot of Sweeney throughout this episode, that idea of looking for redemption for overcoming the mistakes of his own past, and that battle seems to be the only way that he could do it. At least, again, until he sort of remembers the truth about what it was, that it wasn't running away that caused this, that it was forgetting really who he was. But ultimately, really the point, the arc of where we're going with this episode is kind of a reliving of that original curse. The idea of him dying by the spear, his death being foretold by the Banshees. And that's what we're hearing throughout really this episode. The wailing of the Banshees, pretty much foretelling that Sweeney was going to be dead by episode's end. And ends up being, by spear, by Gungnir, killed by Shadow. Who, I guess, had asked him, when death is coming, don't stand in the way. He was hoping that those Banshees might be wailing for Wednesday. Didn't really work out. I mean, it's not that Sweeney and Shadow have the closest of relationships anyway. And Sweeney did seem to enjoy pushing Shadow there pretty much towards the end, almost in a way asking for death. I think he was trying to distract Shadow so that he'd turn around and go after Wednesday, and that would allow him to pick up the spear and thus kill Wednesday himself, which sort of almost worked. But you push too hard, people are gonna react strongly. But it does let Shadow know, at the very least, by the end here, what is the truth behind Laura's death. I think adding on that he slept with Laura too. Again, there's one thing to anger somebody. It's another thing to push a little bit too hard. Not sure exactly how important that was to really relay it outside to just sort of throw Shadow off. Now, one question I did have through the episode is really, what is the reason for Sweeney's kind of decline? Is it just being separated by his coin for so long? I mean, for a moment I was thinking it was the distance separation. Laura had run off and Sweeney's now come back to Cairo, and maybe being so far from his coin is what's really, taking him out. It's one thing to not have the coin, but add the distance on top of that's sort of sucking the life out of him. But he has been kind of a distance from the coin off and on for a while here. So he certainly went down to New Orleans while Laura was off doing this little adventure with Wednesday. So distance certainly seems to reduce his luck, but I don't know if that was really the cause of his kind of whole mental bodily decline there. I mean, it seemed from the episode that he was going mad. And I'm wondering if it was the separation of the coin doing it, or was it the removal of the luck that the coin provided to him, allowing the Banshees to thus fixate on him and thus portend his own death. Having his coin has been able for him to push that predictive death away longer and longer, and thus without it, this is the fate that he avoided long ago finally catching up to him. Again, don't really know. I'd be curious what all your thoughts are on that. And so, it was kind of a very straightforward episode. A lot of storytelling, a lot of backstory, a lot of fun interaction between... Sweeney was kind of connecting with everybody in the funeral parlor. A little chat with Bilquist, a little chat with Salim, a little chat with Ibis, kind of connecting up with everyone. Was sort of cool. Gotta say, loved Bilquist's whole sermon there with the funeral. Her taking the place of the priest, who I guess he's just gone now. Doesn't seem to have it all into him. But Bilquist sort of stepping up, taking the priestly role, but adding her own little sort of physical interpretation of everything. Just sort of sexing everything up for a funeral service, that was stirring a lot of juices, I think, within everyone. Anyway, it was just, I loved seeing Bilquis do that. Take that power, she said to Sweetie. We adapt. And that worked just beautifully. But so yeah, a lot of very cool scenes in here. However, only one can be our Scene of the Week for this week. And that, I'm going back in time. I'm doing our kind of purest flashback that we had. And that is Sweeney's battle with Balor at Magtreed. I'm just going to butcher all of these names. Magturied, English interpretation of what would be Gaelic writing, which I'm sure spelling is entirely different. Anyway, when we get that flashback to him being the God King, protecting his people, the battle against the Fomorians, that was just beautiful. Even the colors were so much brighter than almost everything else in the episode. It was like we were getting this clearish shot of Sweeney in his prime, battling and brutal too, with the spears and the stabbing and the arms being cut off, and just really just wonderfully done. Great slow motion camera work, great shots of the spears just doing like super amounts of damage in the hand of a god who can wield it. It was just in that shot that we have, I think we've got it for the thumbnail actually, where we have him, Sweeney, just coming up with his spear and just in slow motion, the lights and the sounds behind as everybody else is moving and fighting. It was just really cool. It was really beautifully done, very artistic, really had a lot of the big feel of a lot of the scenes that we had from back in season 1. So really just with the color and the action and the intensity, it was perfect. It's what got me really roused up in this episode, and I think it was wonderfully done. Like I said, with the brightness, with the slow motion, with the crafting of these shots. This really, to me, showed this as Sweeney in his prime, the clearest vision of who he really is deep down inside, the god that he forgot he was. All right, just a couple of small things. First off, Yggdrasil, the world tree, has fully grown, and I loved how Wednesday used a branch from the world tree to repair Gungnir, using that as to repair the shaft and make it whole again. It was just super cool. It's so old gods. It's like perfect legendary type stuff. I loved seeing that. But earlier, at the beginning of the episode, right when Shadow first finds Sweeney acting as a troll underneath the bridge, not remembering again here which story is true, when he warns Shadow, he does mention about the hanging tree reaching from the lowest realms up to the highest heavens, and the one branch that comes to Earth, to Midgard, is the branch that holds the rope. Is he implying that Shadow is actually going to be hung from the world tree? Is that what Wednesday is going after? Is Shadow meant to be the sacrifice for this battle to go ahead? It's been mentioned a few times down in the comments that might be one of the reasons why Nancy is so upset, that he is seeing that another black man, that Shadow is going to be used to sacrifice towards a white god's war, effectively. And is this one of the reasons why Nancy is so mad at Shadow, that he's seeing Shadow just coming up, stepping into this role as a sacrifice, and that's something that's going to be pushing the African gods to maybe repel against what Wednesday wants? I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sure if that was just a general warning, but sacrifice is constantly hit upon as the fuel for the gods. And considering that the world tree was just grown into full size, and that's very much the imagery that Sweeney was using to warn Shadow hanging from. The idea that Shadow is here as a sacrifice for Odin does gain a little bit more power there. I really love Mama G. I gotta say, every time she shows up, she is just pulling something, whether it's the writing, whether it's the actress performance, or it's just that combination, really enjoy whenever she's on screen. Just the duality when she's talking with Laura and trying to get her out, and then finally we get the back and forth, and Laura threatens Mama G, who just then reveals herself in her full glory, destruction, power, and then turns it right around there. But I can see you. Do you need help? Do you need direction? Sugar? Something extra with your meal? I mean, it's just, there is so much graciousness in there, combined with a very serious, straightforward, I know who I am, don't mess with me idea. I really love how the character's portrayed on the screen. I love the duality. I love the sort of caringness with total badassery behind it. It's wonderful. And Sweeney hits on it again with his discussion with Samir this episode, that Wednesday collects a lot of debts. And even within their discussion, really seeing how many people are fighting on Wednesday's side because he has something over them, because they have an obligation to him. It's not a willingness to fight, it's because they sort of kind of got him. Again, really interesting. And of course, let us not forget sort of Sweeney's revenge against Odin there at the end. Yes, Sweeney is killed. He is stabbed through with Gungnir. He is death by spear, as was foretold aeons ago. But Sweeney gets the last laugh by sending the spear to the Horde. Oh, that was awesome. And again, a very unexpected moment. You think you're stabbed, you run through, you make your curse, and you die. But no, Sweeney's got his last bit, which is perfectly in character. Takes the spear, concentrates, boom, sends it to the Horde, to the treasure of the sun, not to be regained by Odin. Takes his weapon away with a big double FU there right at the end. So, just, if you're going to go out with a bang. And I think that was the perfect way Sweeney could. So yeah, that seems to be the end of Sweeney. But is it? We do know we did get to see the final fights of Laura coming back to Cairo. She's returning to Shadow. She has his coin within her. Could he be reborn with the coin, kind of much the way she was? Is it from a belief, if someone sort of re-believes in Sweeney, who he is, what he could do, maybe with that little bit of love that Laura has been searching and looking for? Will that be able to raise him up? Because it's interesting, Mama G does sort of hit with Laura that the power is within her. Is it the coin just to be destruction, the way that Laura can be? Or is that sort of implying towards something else, that it's the love inside of her that she's looking for? Is it the love from Sweeney, who, again, flashback with wife, let me in, whatever there was that she was saying, does see Laura's image right there. So just sort of curious. I love Sweeney. I hate to see him go. If you're going to go, this is a big, powerful way to do it. However, death does not seem to be necessarily permanent in this particular world, and with Laura coming back with his lucky coin, I'm just going to say for the moment, the possibilities are out there. But that is going to wrap us up for now. Thank you so much for joining me with this review. We only got one episode left. The season finale is next week. Very excited to see where this is going to go. Again, the season does seem to be all set up with preparing for battle. We had the final supper this episode. It was a short supper, but we did have it in the preparation that war is about to become. So hopefully we will see at least the first opening battle, the first engagement of that war for our season finale next week. But we'll all have to wait and see what it is that actually happens. So thank you again for joining me with this. And if you enjoyed this review, please go ahead and hit that like button. Thoughts, ideas, and comments, throw those right down in the section below. You can always catch me on Twitter and Instagram. I am at Darren Jakes. Please subscribe if you're not a subscriber. I know we only got one episode left of this, but we are in the midst of Game of Thrones, the final season. Plus, we've got Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. starting up in just a couple of weeks on May 10th. So, lots of fun stuff. Don't miss any of it if you're a subscriber. Do that by clicking this button right here. And we'll throw up a couple of our latest reviews right here for you to check out. So, that's going to be it for me. I'm D, and I'm out of here. Catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.